Welcome everyone to the Ecosystem Services session. There are some rules for us presenting. We're also loading all the presentations at the same time. Presenters are allowed 12-minute presentations, followed by a 3-minute with questions. The bell will ring once at 10 minutes and twice at 12 minutes when your time is up. After 15 minutes, we really need to move on to the next presenter. And please keep the time. I will be the first presenter, so if you see me go over time, let me know. So my name is Lina Mtwana Nordlund, and I will talk about seagrass ecosystem services, what's next. And this presentation is in collaboration with several people. Emma, that is in here, and Masa as well, and Jimena, and Pedro, and Joel. So what I'm going to present today is actually the outcome of the expert workshop that we held during the last ISBW. We had 38 workshop participants, and during this workshop we developed 3 priority themes, like what should we do to really advance research about seagrass ecosystem services. The outcome of this workshop, along with the views and opinions of the authors, is published in the Marine Pollution Bulletin in the Seagrass special issue. So why did we decide to have an expert workshop? It's because there aren't that much information out there about seagrass ecosystem services, and especially their variability. And a few years ago, we also did some research showing that there's actually quite a substantial variability in the known seagrass ecosystem service provision. So we think that there is really a need to advance the seagrass ecosystem service research. And the questions we had for this workshops was to look into how do we move forward with the seagrass ecosystem service information that we have, and what other kind of information do we need, and what kind of actions do we need to take to improve this situation, and how can we increase the appreciation for seagrass. So the 3 priority themes that we identified together at these workshops was first to investigate variability of ecosystem service provision within seagrass meadows and among different seagrass meadows. And secondly, to investigate seagrass ecosystem services or seagrass ecosystem service provision within the seascape by comparing delivery of services. And third, to improve communication of seagrass ecosystem services to the public. I will go into a little bit deeper into all these 3 themes. So the first theme about variability in seagrass ecosystem services within and among seagrass meadows. One of these questions that were highlighted during this workshop was that what are the non-linearities in ecosystem service provision within and among seagrass meadows? So what we really urge you seagrass researchers to do is to look into this variability about ecosystem service provision within meadows. If they look different, do they provide still the same services, or what happens to the services depending on where you are in the meadow, etc. And also different meadows, depending where they're located, even though the composition might be the same, they might still deliver different services. A couple of things that were really highlighted is it would be very good if we can get some more information on comparing longer or larger and long-lived species to small, faster-growing species to see the differences in ecosystem service provision. Also within species, for example, Zostera marina, depending on where you are, they can be this big and that big. And also depending on the composition of species in the meadow, do they deliver different services? Another thing that was highlighted during the workshop is it's also important to look into climate conditions in regards to ecosystem service provision. Do a meadow provide or the same services depending on season, and so on. Another thing that was raised during this workshop was about does the scale matter? For example, if you're in Sweden, where we have winter with ice covering our oceans, the amount of services we get from seagrass that is hardly there, they are typically very, very small during the winter, while in the summer they are very, very large. So if you go in and do research, you look at the summer season, and then you take an average over the year and you base that on the summer season data, you might not get a very good estimate. Also the spatial scale, I have a picture there at the bottom. If you survey fish in the center of the meadow and your scale is maybe a meter, but large predatory fish, they often hang out on the outskirts of the meadow. So if you want to survey the fish community, you need to kind of scale up. So it's really important to have the right spatial scale depending on what service you want to look into. During this workshop, we also discussed a lot about the importance of tailor the scale to demand. For example, the United Nations, they might not be interested in what I'm doing outside or in my smaller little locality. They might be more interested in what seagrass can do on a global scale. While to the fishermen, it might be very important to know what's going on in their area. The second theme that we discussed during this workshop was the seagrass ecosystem services within the seascape, highlighting that comparing delivery of services among the different coastal and marine habitats, and look at the relative importance of seagrass. So can it be useful to compare ecosystem service delivery among coastal habitats? There have been some, especially evaluations comparing some more well-known habitats like corals and mangroves, but we often don't. We often don't include these comparisons to even less charismatic habitats like mudflats. We see a lot of valuation of seagrass or marine ecosystem services coming out, but especially for seagrass, they seldom include all different types of services, and that, in my opinion, often results in under evaluation. So something we also highlighted during this workshop is to look into how important is understanding the connectivity of seagrass ecosystem services in the seascape. And look into, okay, how does this seascape look like? How does this, the surrounding to this meadow, how does that affect the provision of ecosystem services? For example, adult fish, they often migrate between the coral and seagrass. If we don't have so much coral, we might have a lower diversity of fish in the seagrass. So this is one example of how fish diversity could change or change depending on your surrounding habitats. And the third theme is about communicating and linking ecosystem services to people and communities. And this was the most highlighted outcome of the workshop. And we really need to identify which messages and mechanisms should we use to communicate ecosystem services. And we also think it's very important that we work together with communicators that knows how to do this. We know very little about most effective strategies, and it's really important to identify the right message for the target group. And it's also very important to communicate which ecosystem services that you think are most important to you, to your area, to the people. And it's also very important to know your audience if you want to communicate these seagrass ecosystem services effectively. Okay. Another thing that we highlighted during this third theme was what are the possible mechanisms for communication to build awareness. We need to learn more about what or which media outlets are successful. And we need to learn and understand what kind of tools that we should use to communicate this. Okay. So just to conclude, we identified these three broad themes. And those were investigate variability of ecosystem services within seagrass meadows and among different meadows. Secondly, investigate seagrass ecosystem services within the seascape by comparing delivery of services and to improve the communication of seagrass ecosystem services to the public. Okay, thank you. If someone has a question, I'm happy to answer. Oh, do you want to run for me? Okay, is it on? Yeah.
You talked about ecosystem services in general. Which ecosystem services do you think are the most critical to be looking at?
I think it very much depends on the target audience, to be honest. I mean, for us, as seagrass ecosystem, or as seagrass researchers, I think all of them are important. But if you're a fisherman, for example, I'm sure everything that is fish-related is very, very important to you. Or if you are working with the climate change-related questions, blue carbon might be the most important ecosystem service to you. What I do think is that a lot of the cultural and spiritual ecosystem services is probably a really good way to reach people. But yeah, it depends. My answer is it depends on the target audience.